All right, welcome to the Jimmy Duster Music Channel. Glad to have you back. Here with my friend, as always, the incorrigible Luddite. Keep on calling it Luddite. I know it's a Luddite. So,
It,
got a great, interesting topic for you today. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know your favorites and any ideas you have for future topics. We'll talk about what we're going to be doing next episode a little later on. But today we are exploring guitar multiples, I guess, guitar duos, trios, quadruplets. You know, whatever you think. Multiple guitar bands or our favorite multiple guitar performances. We'll talk about some of our favorite performances by these guitar duos, trios, whatever we come up with here. So I think we'll maybe cover our first couple, our 5 and a 4. And then I'll go first tonight, and then you give your 5 and 4, and then we'll do 3 and 2 and 3 and 2, and then come back for our number 1.
you got it.
I don't think we're going to have any overlap tonight, although we might. There's one that might overlap for us, so we'll see here.
Interesting.
So, okay. So, favorite guitar duos. I went off the reservation a little bit for my first two. I actually in my 5 and 4 slot, I've actually had about 6 or 7 different combinations in there today, and finally settled on one because this was tough for me. This was a tough to narrow down from about 25 to 10, and then narrow that 10 down to 5. And my first 3 out, I've got to mention them: Clapton and Allman together on the Derrick and the Dominoes, Lennon and Harrison, of course, tons of great performances, and Jerry and Bobby from the Grateful Dead. Those are my first 3 out. So
I can't believe Jerry and Bobby didn't make it for you.
Yeah, it was close. It was close, and this one kind of snuck in. It was as I was going through my records today. It's my favorite. It's not a genre that you would associate with me a lot, but it's 60s country, and the dual Telecaster guitars of Mr. Buck Owens and Don Rich, his longtime partner and sideman. This is the only album I have that they appear on. But my favorite performances with them are Love's Gonna Live Here and Act Naturally. So I had to, the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what, I'm going to get some country in here because it comes out of left field a little bit for me there. So number 4, I'm a fan of the blues. And when I first started listening to the blues, my introduction to the blues came through Stevie Ray Vaughan, and started following, Robin Ford. And Robin Ford has long been one of my favorite guitar players, and he used to talk about his influences. And when he was young, he heard a gentleman by the name of Mike Bloomfield on guitar. Mm-hmm. And for guitar duos, I think Mike Bloomfield and Elvin Bishop, the stuff they did with the Butterfield Blues Band, specifically off this album, Born in Chicago, the incredible East West on the album that came after this one, the instrumental version East West. So that's my 5 and 4. Owens and Rich at 5, and Bishop and Bloomfield at 4.
Great picks. Cannot argue with those. My number 5 is going to be Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew of King Crimson. And this is Discipline. I don't have this on vinyl. This is a fantastic record. If I was going to pick the top 5 records of 1981, this might get in the top 5. It will definitely be in the top 10. They have a really interesting way of playing guitar with one another. Now, with that being said, my favorite King Crimson records are Just with Fripp Only, In the Court, and Red are my 2 favorite. This is probably my 3rd favorite, though. And some really great sonic textures when they play together on this record between Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew. Highlights would definitely be Frame by Frame, Discipline, Indiscipline, and one of my 5 favorite instrumental tracks of all time, and that is The Sheltering Sky. I absolutely love that instrumental. So my number 5, Adrian Blue, Robert Fripp, King Crimson.
I had that one. I had that one in one of my 4 and 5 combinations today too. So
This is from 1981.
yeah.
My number 4 is going to be Soundgarden, and that would be Kim Thayil and of course the late Chris Cornell. Now they actually work very well together. If you listen to Soundgarden music, they don't get the credit that they deserve for being quite experimental compared to the other Seattle bands. Um, Again, I think musically, Soundgarden leaps and bounds above Alice in Chains, Nirvana, or Pearl Jam. That's what I hear as a listener. Um, they're the only one of those 4 bands that really ventured into progressive rock territory. They use a lot of unusual time signatures. Um, Cornell would lay down some very, very heavy riffs, and Thayil plays kind of these very tweaked out psychedelic solos with some dissonance in it, almost kind of like a bridge between like Sonic Youth style dissonance and like psychedelic stuff from the late 60s, and it really works well together. Very heavy what they do. They work quite well together. Bad Motorfinger is my favorite Soundgarden record from 1991, and Soundgarden is my number 4.
All right, great choice.
Kim Thayil and Chris Cornell.
Yeah, great choices, both those. The 90s was tough for me because I wasn't really in. I like Soundgarden, but I never really dug deep into their catalog and things of that nature. But
by far my favorite band out of Seattle from that time frame, not even remotely close for me.
Yeah.
And I also think Cornell, this is not looking at the guitar work. I think you can make an argument for who you like the vocals better for. But I think is lyrically, Chris Cornell leaps and bounds above the other 3.
Yeah.
But that's just what I hear.
Yeah, I would agree with you from what I know. And like I said, that's not my wheelhouse as far as genres go. But
not mine either. I mean, I was much more into that stuff when I was younger. But honestly, Alice in Chains and Nirvana, neither one really ever held up for me that well. I was never a Pearl Jam fan. I hate to say it, but I live in Seattle, but I never really was a Pearl Jam guy. I did like Alice in Chains and Nirvana at one point. Haven't held up quite that well. Soundgarden has held up extremely well for me. This is the only piece of music that I have from that very famous era of this city, Seattle, from 1990 to 1994. This is all I have. Bad Motorfinger.
I do have that Discipline on vinyl too, and I forgot to pull it out to use as a prop. But like I said, I had that one in my top 5. I like the song Thella Hun Ginjeet.
Yeah, it's fantastic too. It's
an elephant talk when Baloo's doing all the elephant sounds, and
my biggest
more for the prop guitar type of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like new wave meets prog. There's like a lot of new wave elements on Discipline, and it kind of meets some of the earlier progressive tendencies. It has a very big Talking Heads influence on it. Yeah, particularly Adrian Belews' vocal style. I think the thing that holds me back from liking this much as their first 2, well, Red's almost an entirely instrumental record for the most part, but I'm not huge on Adrian Belews' vocals. I don't dislike them. I just don't think he's a competent vocalist, but he's very much in that David Byrne. He has very much a David Byrne style of vocal delivery, and I like Discipline a lot for the experimentation on it. It's not the vocals, but I'm giving it a pass because they play so well together.
And that reminded me of some combinations that I forgot. Write these down here while I'm thinking about it. All right, so great choices. Now to our number 3 and 2. Number 3, I had to get something from the hard rock / heavy metal category in here. And I went with probably not the most, well, certainly not the most well-known of this band's guitar duos, but my favorite in their long catalog of hits, Scorpions. And this was with Rudolf Schenker and Uli John Roth. And specifically this album, the Taken by Force album, is a great showcase. This was the last album Uli John Roth did with them. and the song that he's been associated most with, The Sails of Charon. Just a fantastic riff on that song. Great solo. My favorite performance of Schenker and UJR together. But Rudy Schenker, Yulie John Roth, the Scorpions, Taken by Force.
Great pick.
Number 2, I don't have any vinyl or CD of, but it's the two gentlemen pictured behind me here. Pat Travers and Pat Thrall, the Dueling Pats. Did 3 albums together, I believe, with the Pat Travers band. And Pat Thrall brought more of a, I guess, a harder edge to the Pat Travers sound. You know, Travers was more of a blues player, and Thrall was more of a almost a jazz rock type of a guy. So they combined well together. And specifically, my favorite performances of them is one of my 5 favorite live albums ever. It's from the Go For What You Know album.
Okay.
Snortin' Whiskey, another good performance of theirs. It wasn't on that live album, but has been on other live albums. I don't know if there's any appearances of them together, but the album that followed live, Go For What You Know, I forget the name of it, but it contained Snortin' Whiskey. So that's my number 2, Pat Thrall and Mr. Pat Travers over there.
Okay. I'm up for number 3 now, correct?
Yep.
My number 3, band I've seen many times live. Excellent interplay between these guitar players. They may not be the most technical guitar players, but that is not what draws me in as a listener to anyone. I tend to like abstract players. I like players who have a visual style, and Jimi Hendrix is the king of this, okay, because he played in a very visual style. He was also very technical. These guys aren't as technical, but together as a team, it's going to be Sonic Youth. It's going to be Lee Renato and Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth. I've had the pleasure of seeing them many times live. As a fan of the Velvet Underground, you would probably really appreciate their stuff. It's very hypnotic what they do. They use a lot of dissonance. There's often an atonal feel to what they're doing. They're really not playing solos at all, but they do play off each other brilliantly. Kind of in the same way, different style of music, obviously. This is dissonant, arty stuff, but it's not far removed from the Dickie Betts and the Duane Allmans of the world, the way they play off of each other live. They took feedback to an absolute different level. The feedback, would have started with Hendrix and The Who and even the Velvets themselves. Sonic Youth, again, they took feedback to a different level. Alternate tunings, highly influential band, a big influence on both Nirvana and Radiohead, post OK Computer. But Evil is my favorite Sonic Youth record. Just brilliant stuff all over this. Star Power, Madonna, Sean and Me. Also Tom Violence, which is pretty harrowing track. And my favorite, Shadow of a Doubt, which has Kim Gordon on vocals. But my number 3, I think most people think Daydream Nation is their magnum opus, but for me, my favorite's actually Evil from 1986. Thurston Moore, Lee Renato, Sonic Youth, number 3. Number 2, this is my art rock pick. It's going to be Johnny Greenwood and Ed O'Brien of Radiohead. This is the only record I have by anyone outside of one artist. And I don't mean this artist, post 1991. So this is kind of a breach of my little rule for one artist. This album, Kid A, means quite a bit to me. Definitely not a guitar-driven record, but the textures and the tones when Ed O'Brien and Johnny Greenwood played together really has a very mysterious vibe to it. Radiohead is a highly visual band. Again, if you're not familiar with their music, if you've been living in a cave for years, they would be the modern day equivalent to early Pink Floyd. But I would say with better vocals. I think Tom York's vocal style was kind of inspired by Jeff Buckley a bit. But you can take this record, Kid A, you can take OK Computer, you can take Amnesiac, In Rainbows. There's great textured guitar work all over those three records, in which Ed O'Brien and Johnny Greenwood play together with beautiful interplay. And that's my number two, Johnny Greenwood and Ed O'Brien of Radiohead.
Good choices, both very influential, certainly. So I think people forget how influential Sonic Youth was.
Oh, enormously influential. I mean, just monumentally influential.
All right, our number ones. I got to get some stuff together here. Sorry, I should have had this ready to go. Okay. I could have made a top 5 dual guitar out of one band. And I can't pick a favorite combination. Of course, I'm talking about the Allman Brothers.
They're great. They are incredible.
You had Dicky and Duane, Dicky and Dangerous Dan Toller, Dicky and Warren, Dicky and Derek, Warren and Derek. So, 5 combinations right there. Of course, I've got Eat a Peach, the Brothers and Sisters album, with Dangerous Dan Toller on guitar, along with Dicky. Their debut, Seven Turns album, with Warren and Dicky on clear vinyl. Just great performances all throughout there. One Way Out, of course, Statesboro Blues off the live album.
That's incredible. That live Statesboro Blues.
Jessica, Whipping Post, any of their instrumental songs. Seven Turns off of this one. True Gravity, another great instrumental tune off of this one. I think probably their most underrated of their instrumental tunes. I could go on and on all day about the Allman Brothers and their guitar duos that they've had that never been a bad one. It's just, it's incredible the amount of guitar talent that one band has been able to replace and better and change and mix things around, but they never lose a beat, never lost a beat with all their different combinations. So that's my number one.
I have a question about them. Do you know a lot about their history, like how they formed and started? Do you know a lot about that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it true? I just read this somewhere. Did they used to practice at graveyards?
I've heard that before, yeah. I've heard that in some of the books I've read about them.
Yeah, it's interesting. They would hang around graveyards and practice. That's what I read somewhere. I thought that was interesting. And there's a lot of tragedy in that band.
Yeah.
And
the famous story of Duane shooting Greg in the foot so he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam. And
I didn't know that, but I know that Duane and Barry Oakley, I think they passed away almost a year apart to the day, very close, within in the same half mile or mile radius.
Yeah. Yep.
Just a lot of strange coincidences with that band, but sure we're talented for sure. My number one, there's nothing else it could be. And I mentioned a long time ago, one of our other episodes, I had to look back at this one, but I think Blondie Auto American in 1980 was a record that really was instrumental in me getting into music. But there actually is one record before that really made me a huge music fan. And it has to be, I should say, the Rolling Stones' Some Girls. This is my number one classic album cover. I will say that this album cover is one of my favorite album covers of all time. This is the band cover. They had to redo this about 6 or 8 months later because the estates of some of these stars weren't very happy. The Stones obliged, and in a humorous kind of a way, they put under construction and replaced some of the faces. But this is the original band cover. It's not expensive. It's not rare. Millions of these got out. I think it's really a great cover. It's got, I believe, Judy Garland on it. I want to say Raquel Welch, rest in peace, Raquel Welch. And I think also Jane Mansfield. So it's got some pretty big names on it. And Yeah, I think it's a fantastic cover. But getting into music, whew, growing up, I remember hearing "Miss You" all over like mainstream radio stations. And it's a song that's always stuck with me. I love that song. There's a disco mix of "Miss You" actually that's enhanced, longer, an extended mix. It might be my favorite extended mix track by anyone of all time. It's not disco at all. It has like a disco element, but it's a rock, much more rocking than the version on here. Um, then you've got Shattered, which has punk rock vibes in it. And well, the reason this record is so great, in my opinion, compared to things that say the Who and Led Zeppelin were doing around the same time, this takes what was going on around this time, integrates it into the Rolling Stones style while retaining their style, but adding some flavor from what's going on around them and really, really nailing it. There's disco on here. There are punk rock vibes. There's classic Rolling Stones ballads like "A Beast of Burden," and that's the reason this is my number one. That song in particular, "Beast of Burden," such the weaving on that song, the beautiful interplay between Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. That's my number one. That's the best guitar work tandem I've ever heard, the best dual guitar playing I've ever heard. It's not about the shredding, folks. It's about the feel of the music. And Ron Wood and Keith Richards really capture some beauty on this record. Other great stuff on here too, like "Faraway Eyes," the country spoof. The Stones do country better than country bands for me. The punk rock stuff, the disco stuff, fantastic record, 10 out of 10. My second favorite Rolling Stones record, and this is my number one, Ron Wood and Keith Richards.
Great choice. Yeah, that was another one tough for me to leave off the list. However, I did know that you were going to have them on there. I tend to favor the Keith and Mick Taylor.
They're great too, but they're fantastic.
I think it's blues player.
I think it's a bit more, and I should have said Ronnie Wood, not Ron Wood. My apologies, Ronnie Wood. I said Ron Wood. I caught myself. Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards is my number one of the Rolling Stones. That this terrific run between 78 and 81. It's not just Some Girls. It's also Emotional Rescue, which is really underrated. Tattoo You's a great record. I mean, come on. That's a great 3-album run. And that's what I grew up with. And it takes me right back to a certain place and certain time, especially that Some Girls record. I remember being on the road with my mom, going to JCPenney outlet store on Scarborough Boulevard when there was nothing there. It was just barren, and this song's on the radio, and it's like, I'm like into this song. Like, this is so good. And before this, it was like I was listening to Ambrosia or whatever else was on the radio. But this song got so much airplay, and it's held up for me so well. And "Beast of Burden" is probably my second favorite Rolling Stones song of all time. I'll mention my favorite coming up. But
what year did that come out?
1978.
Okay.
And again,
my interpretation, I don't know if I've told you this before, but I always thought that they said, "I'll never leave your pizza burning." So about the first 10 times I heard that song, I thought that's what it was. I thought it was pizza burning instead of "Beast of Burden."
I think "Beast of Burden" is the greatest rock ballad of all time. I'm just going to play. It's not a traditional rock kind of a ballad, and it's because of the guitar play between Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. I mean, take a close listen, take a really close listen to that song, folks, and see how well they mesh.
You got some honorables?
I do. I'm going to start out with none other than the Rolling Stones. Different era, also fabulous. Brian Jones and Keith Richards. This is "Flowers" from 1967. This cover, kind of cool. A bit of a prank on Brian Jones by Mick and Keith. He doesn't have any stems on his flower. Unfortunately, that was kind of an ominous prediction of things to come for Brian Jones. But what a musician Brian Jones was. Let's not forget about him. He started the band. It was his band before he fell apart. But so many great moments by Brian Jones and Keith Richards together. Maybe not as good as they didn't mesh as well maybe as Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. But come on, "Ruby Tuesday" is undeniable. And all Mick had to do was sing the song. That's all he had to do. Keith Richards wrote the song. Brian Wood, Brian Jones. Brian Jones provides the memorable recorder, which is what you hear on the song that really makes that song. And then you've got the stuff off Satanic Majesty's Request, talking about the gorgeous broke pop of She's a Rainbow. It's uneven record as a whole, but the high points in that record, like She's a Rainbow, beautiful song. And my favorite Rolling Stones song of all time, that's 2,000 Light Years from Home, off their Satanic Majesty's Request. Maybe the greatest psychedelic rock song ever recorded. First honorable mention, Brian Jones and Keith Richards. Next up, Mick Taylor and Keith Richards. Here we go again. This is, I don't have Sticky Fingers or Exile on Main Street on vinyl. They're way out of my price range, folks. And I actually don't like Exile enough to get it on vinyl. I do like Sticky Fingers that much, but I don't like the zipper. I don't love the cover. It also reminds me of too much of Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue. I hate to say it, but it does. That cover, maybe the most overrated cover ever. I actually like this cover. This is an inexpensive record. Really great stuff on here besides what you know. It's only rock and roll. Some of the deep cuts on this record on It's Only Rock and Roll. This is the last record with Mick Taylor, by the way. Dance Little Sister. Awesome song. Almost proto post-punk, and also Fingerprint File. And you know all about, Exile on Main Street and Sticky Fingers. Those records need zero introduction. Next honorable mention is going to be Iron Maiden. I went ahead and I took Somewhere in Time as my pick today. I don't know why. I love the artwork on this record, which is Philip K. Dick inspired, but so many great dual leads, trading leads between Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. And I am looking at the era pre-1990. I know they have 3 guitar players now. I know, but I am looking back because as some people know, I'm more of an 80s kind of a guy. And yeah, great sonic textures between Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. Wasted Years, The Trooper, Fly to Icarus, 2 Minutes to Midnight, and of course my favorite Iron Maiden song of all time, their magnum opus, the 13-minute Samuel Taylor Coleridge inspired Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Dave Murray, Adrian Smith, Iron Maiden, another honorable mention. Let's get back to some straightforward rock and roll like the Stones, AC/DC, Powerage, the Young Brothers. I mean, they work very well together. Yes, their songs often sound kind of alike. They're kind of like the Ramones or Motorhead in that respect. Not a lot of diversity in sound, but if there was one AC/DC record that does it for me, it's Powerage. This is my favorite. Great riffs on this record with Down Payment Blues, Sin City, and Riff Raff. This is my favorite AC/DC record, and that's Malcolm Young and Angus Young. Another honorable mention. Def Leppard, High and Dry, 1981. We are talking about not their most famous lineup with Phil Collins, but here we have Pete Willis, the original guitar player with the late Steve Clark. Like the way they play together. High and Dry, this is my favorite Def Leppard record, without any question. Bringing on the Heartbreak, which is on this record. Great interplay on that. Power ballad, probably the best power ballad of the 80s, in my opinion. It's a gorgeous song with great lyrics by Joe Elliott. But they mesh quite well together on the hard rock classic, Pete Willis and Steve Clark. Band we covered last week, Rat. The best of the glam metal bands, without any question. By far my favorite glam metal band, actually. And we're talking about Robin Crosby mainly on lead, with Warren DeMartini playing the leads. They work quite well together for the genre, and that's another honorable mention. A couple I don't have that I wanted to throw out there, the Allman Brothers. And that's, of course, Duane Allman and Dicky Betts. I agree with you. They're fantastic. Their interplay is absolutely amazing. Live at Fillmore East is the standout for me. I mean, they're not exactly in my wheelhouse, but I sure respect them. And kind of like my next honorable mention coming up, my last one, I'm not that keen on Greg Allman's vocals. That's like I understand how talented he was on the organ and how that worked with the band's overall sound, but when I hear the Allman Brothers, I just want to hear Dicky Betts and Duane Allman just do their thing. It's like a free jazz kind of feel to what they did. Very improvisational, those two. So yeah, and Fillmore East is their landmark record as far as I'm concerned. My last honorable mention, uh, the founder, the leader of the band, actually passed away about a month, maybe 5 weeks ago. And that's going to be New York post-punk outfit Television, and that's going to be Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd. And again, this is a band that was not a punk rock band, very prominent in the CBGB scene. Their big album, their big influential album, of course, is Marquee Moon from 1977. Great interplay on this record between Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine. Their interplay is quite similar in some ways to Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. They weave the guitars together brilliantly. I think Lloyd was more the lead player, Verlaine more the rhythm player, but they kind of bounced it back and forth a bit. The title track, Marquee Moon, is absolutely beautiful. Very much an art rock band, kind of the bridge between the Velvet Underground and Sonic Youth. And rest in peace, Tom Verlaine. That's my last honorable mention. Television, Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine.
Great choices. We got a few here that we haven't mentioned yet. Glenn and KK.
Okay.
Judas Priest, two of my favorite albums by them, Sinner, Diamonds and Rust, Exciter. Just great songs all around on both of these. Of course, you mentioned our friends from Iron Maiden. I would also add not only Murray and Smith, but Kotzen and Smith. Richie Kotzen and Adrian Smith have a great album out together. If you haven't heard it yet, it's worth it.
I have not. What year is that from?
Maybe 2018, 2019.
Oh, recent. Very recent. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there's some good videos on YouTube that you can find of Kotzen and Smith doing some shows together. So good stuff. Whitesnake. Not only Sykes and Vandenberg, but the duo that I like the best, the Mickey Moody, Bernie Marsden years, this is a 8 disc box set I have with a lot of their early years, the pre-US years for them. What else I got here? The Fogerty Brothers.
Great pick.
I already talked about Lennon and Harrison.
Sure.
It's here. Brad Whitford, Joe Perry, Aerosmith.
Undeniable.
Another band not known for guitar duos, known more for studio musicians. But Steely Dan, when they came out with this album, Walter Becker and John Harrington have been playing together. Played together for several years up until Walter's passing a few years back. But great album here. Mike Campbell and Tom Petty. We talked about Grateful Dead earlier. A couple picture discs I have of theirs. Another Judas Priest record. Some that I don't have anything by. The four-headed guitar monster that was Alan Collins, Gary Rossington, who we just lost, Ed King, Steve Gaines from Leonard Skinner, Don Felder and Joe Walsh.
Okay.
Kotzen and Smith, I talked about them. Clapton and Allman. Frank Hannon and Tommy Skiotz from Tesla. DeGarmo and Wilton from Queensryche. Gorham and Robertson from Thin Lizzy. I had Keith Richards and Mick Taylor down, Fripp and Ballou. And a couple I thought of after we started the show, when we were talking about Fripp and Ballou. Fripp is kind of I've always considered him almost a mad scientist type of a guy.
He absolutely is. He's very much.
Robert
Fripp is one of my 5 favorite guitar players ever, just for the record. There's no denying it. He's such an amazing. His solo on, I think it's called Fracture, and I don't know what album that is on. I don't know if I think it's on Starless and Bible Black might be the one that it's on. That is one of the 2 or 3 best solos I've ever heard. It ranks up there with the best stuff by Hendrix. I don't even know how he did what he did as a listener.
But another guitar mad scientist I always think of is Frank Zappa.
Yep.
And you have Frank and Warren Cucurullo, which is a similar pairing as Fripp and Blue almost. They kind of, Cucurullo brought some of that more pop, new wave rock sensibilities to Frank Zappa's Mad Scientist. And even a little after that period when it was Frank and Steve Vai.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Vai's a mad scientist in his own right and is a master of making different sounds on the guitar, much like Adrian Belew. And when he joined Zappa, there was a lot of that Fripp Belew mentality, I guess, kind of going on with the group. So great show, great picks. I think you gave me a lot of good stuff there I hadn't thought about. So
I think you should check the television record out because it's something that's not necessarily in your wheelhouse that I think you would actually really appreciate. It's got the kind of interplay. They're much more technical than their New York contemporaries.
Yeah.
This is not the Ramones, okay? They actually have a lot of progressive rock elements. Television, so
yeah, I've read about them and heard about them and heard bits and pieces, but never really studied them in depth.
I have the same problem with them as with the Allman Brothers, and that's I don't really like Tom Verlaine's vocals that much. If there's anything that's punk rock about television, it was Tom's vocals.
Yeah.
I just don't like that kind of a vocal style. Greg Allman has a very different vocal style than Tom Verlaine, but I don't really like his vocal style either. I'm very picky about vocalists, I must say. But the songwriting by television is fantastic, and the guitar playing by television is fantastic. Again, this is the most talented band to come out of the CBGB scene, more talented than Blondie or the Ramones or the Talking Heads. Very talented. They are the prog rockers of the scene, okay? So you might want to check television.
I'll have to do that. Join us in 2 weeks, folks. We're going to be running down our 5 favorite female vocalists. We've already done our favorite guitar players not named Jimmy or Eddie. Then we're going to do our top 5 favorite female vocalists. I think we know what Mr. Luddites will be there, but interested to hear who his 2 through 5 are going to be. And hopefully we'll get Dr. Kelly back joining us in 2 weeks. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Be with us in 2 weeks. Please like, subscribe, and any comments are much appreciated.
Thanks
Thank you.
for
Good
watching.
night.
Have a great night.